If you think you know what hell looks like, think again. Because what I'm about to show you will haunt your dreams forever. Smash that subscribe button and drop a comment if you dare to go where most people are too afraid to look. Let's descend into the darkness together. The Administrative Maximum Facility, ADX Florence, sits in the high desert of Colorado like a scar on the landscape. From above, it looks almost ordinary, just another government building surrounded by barbed wire and concrete. But this is no ordinary prison. This is where America buries its most dangerous secrets, its most violent offenders. The men society has decided should never again see the light of day. This is the place where human beings go to disappear forever. On a freezing January morning in 2019, FBI Special Agent Marcus Webb stood outside the reinforced steel entrance of ADX Florence with a single photograph in his hand. The image showed a young woman named Sarah Winters, 23 years old, blonde hair, bright smile, a college student from Boulder who had vanished without a trace 6 months earlier. Marcus had been assigned to her case after local police hit a dead end. Every lead had evaporated. Every witness had nothing useful to say. Sarah had simply walked out of her apartment one Tuesday afternoon and never came back. But 3 days ago, everything changed. A letter arrived at the FBI field office in Denver, postmarked from inside ADX Florence itself. The envelope contained no return address, just a single line written in careful block letters. If you want to find Sarah Winters, ask Thomas Rake about the desert. Thomas Rake. The name alone was enough to make seasoned investigators feel a chill run down their spine. Rake was a serial killer, convicted of murdering 7 women across 3 states during a brutal 18-month spree that ended in 2015. He had been sentenced to multiple life terms and sent to ADX Florence, where he had spent the last 4 years in complete isolation. 23 hours a day in a 7-by 12-foot concrete cell. 1 hour of solitary exercise in a slightly larger concrete box. No human contact, no windows, no hope of ever leaving. Marcus had studied the Rake case extensively during his training at Quantico. The murders had been methodical, cold, brutal. Rake had targeted young women, college students mostly, luring them with promises of photography work or modeling opportunities. Their bodies had been found in remote locations, always carefully posed, always stripped of identification. Rake had never shown remorse, even during his trial. He had smiled at the families of his victims, had treated the entire proceedings like a game he was winning. And now, somehow, Rake was claiming knowledge about Sarah Winters, a woman who had disappeared years after he had been locked away in the most secure prison facility in the United States. The prison warden, a stern woman named Patricia Hollis, met Marcus in the administration building. She was in her late 50s, with iron gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen too much darkness to be surprised by anything anymore. She handed Marcus a visitor badge and a thick folder containing Rake's prison records. "Agent Webb," she said, her voice flat and professional, "I need you to understand something before you go in there. Thomas Rake is not like other inmates. He is highly intelligent, highly manipulative, and extremely dangerous. He has spent 4 years in isolation with nothing but his own thoughts. Whatever game he is playing, he has had plenty of time to plan it." Marcus nodded. He had interviewed violent offenders before, had sat across from rapists and murderers, and looked into eyes that held nothing but contempt for human life. But there was something about ADX Florence itself that made his skin crawl. The silence here was oppressive and natural. It pressed down on you like a physical weight. They walked through a series of checkpoints, each one more secure than the last. Reinforced doors that required 3 separate keys, metal detectors, full-body scanners, guards who watched every movement with hands resting on their weapons. Finally, they reached the special housing unit where the most dangerous inmates were kept. The cells here were soundproofed, designed to prevent any communication between prisoners. Each door was solid steel with a small slot for food trays and a narrow window of reinforced glass. Warden Hollis stopped in front of cell H217. "He knows you are coming," she said. "We informed him this morning. He has been waiting." Through the small window, Marcus could see Thomas Rake sitting on the edge of his concrete bed. He was smaller than Marcus had expected, maybe 5'9", slender build, with thinning brown hair and pale skin that looked almost translucent from years without sunlight. But his eyes, when they lifted to meet Marcus through the glass, were sharp and alert. There was intelligence there, and something else, amusement. The interview room was a concrete box, -1 feet by 8 feet, with a stainless steel table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs on opposite sides. Rake was broad and wearing full restraints, hands cuffed to a chain around his waist, ankles shackled together. 2 guards positioned themselves at the door, hands on their batons. Rake shuffled to his chair and sat down slowly, the chains rattling with every movement. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Marcus studied Rake's face, looking for any sign of deception or manipulation. Rake smiled, a thin curve of his lips that did not reach his eyes. "Agent Webb," Rake said finally. His voice was soft, cultured, with a faint trace of a southern accent. "Thank you for coming. I was beginning to think my letter had been ignored." "Tell me about Sarah Winters," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady and emotionless. Rake leaned back in his chair as much as the restraints would allow. "Ah, Sarah. Beautiful girl. Such a waste. You have been in this prison for 4 years. Sarah disappeared 6 months ago. How could you possibly know anything about her? That is the question, is it not?" Rake's smile widened. "But I think you already know the answer, Agent Webb. You are an intelligent man. You have read my file. You know, I did not work alone." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. During the original investigation, there had been theories that Rake had an accomplice, someone who helped him identify targets and dispose of evidence. But no concrete proof had ever been found. Rake had never admitted to having a partner. Marcus asked. Now, Rake said, wagging one finger as much as the chains would permit. "Information like that requires reciprocation. I give you something, you give me something. That is how civilized people conduct business. I am not making deals with you." Then Sarah Winters stays lost, Rake said simply, "and the others after her will too." The words hung in there like poison. "Others," plural. Marcus leaned forward. "What others?" Rake's eyes glittered with satisfaction. "Subscribe to my newsletter, Agent Webb, and I will tell you everything. But first, I need you to do something for me, something small, a gesture of good faith. What do you want?" "I want 1 hour outside my cell. 1 hour in the yard with sunlight on my face. I have not felt the sun in 4 years. Surely 1 hour is a small price to pay for the location of a missing girl." Marcus knew he should refuse. He knew he should walk out of the room and pursue other leads. But the look in Rake's eyes told him everything he needed to know. This monster had information, real information, and if there were other victims, other families waiting for answers, Marcus had a responsibility to find them. "I will see what I can do," Marcus said carefully. Rake smiled wider. "Good, very good. Come back tomorrow, Agent Webb, and I will tell you about the dessert. I will tell you where they buried Sarah Winters. And I will tell you about the men who put her there." Marcus stood to leave, but Rake's voice stopped him at the door. "Agent Webb, one more thing. When you find Sarah, look at her left hand. You will understand everything." The guards escorted Rake back to his cell. Marcus stood alone in the interview room, his mind racing. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to his partner back in Denver, requesting a full background check on everyone who had visited Thomas Rake in the past 4 years. Every letter sent, every phone call made, every single point of contact with the outside world. Because somewhere out there, someone was still killing, and Thomas Rake, locked away in the most secure prison in America, was somehow directing them. Marcus walked back through the maze of security checkpoints, through the oppressive silence of ADX Florence, through the reinforced doors that sealed off the worst of humanity from the rest of the world. But as he stepped out into the cold Colorado air, he could not shake the feeling that he had just made a terrible mistake. He looked down at the photograph of Sarah Winters one more time. Her bright smile, her hopeful eyes. Somewhere out in the desert, her body was waiting to be found. And whatever secrets she held in her left hand would change everything Marcus thought he knew about this case. But when the forensics team arrived at the coordinates Rake would provide the next day, when they started digging in the hard desert soil 50 miles outside of Boulder, what they found was not just Sarah Winters. It was 7 other bodies. All young women. All positioned the same way. And every single one of them had disappeared after Thomas Rake had been locked away in ADX Florence. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the excavation site as forensic teams worked in careful, methodical silence. Marcus stood at the edge of the dig, watching as body after body was carefully extracted from the sandy earth. Each one wrapped in plastic sheeting. Each one positioned with hands crossed over the chest. Each one a daughter, a sister, a friend who had vanished without explanation. Sarah Winters had been the first they found, exactly where Thomas Rake said she would be, but she was not alone in that unmarked grave. The desert had kept its secrets well, preserving the evidence that would now unravel everything. Dr. Elena Martinez, the lead forensic pathologist, approached Marcus with a grim expression. She pulled off her protective gloves and wiped the sweat from her forehead, leaving a smudge of dirt across her temple. She had been working nonstop for 16 hours, examining each victim with painstaking care. Agent Webb, she said quietly, "You need to see this." They walked to the mobile forensics lab, a converted trailer parked 100 yards from the site. Inside, the air conditioning hummed, providing relief from the brutal heat. On the examination table lay the remains of Sarah Winters, carefully cleaned and documented. Elena pointed to the left hand. "Rake told you to look here," she said. And he was right. Marcus leaned closer. There, on Sarah's ring finger, was a small mark, not a ring, not jewelry, a tattoo. A simple design, barely a quarter-inch in size. It looked like a spiral, or perhaps a fingerprint, done in black ink. "All of them have it," Elena continued. "Every single victim. Same location. Same design. Same ink." Marcus felt his blood run cold. This was not in any of the original case files on Rake's victims. Because none of his original victims had this mark, Elena confirmed. "I pulled the autopsy reports from 2015. Nothing like this was documented. These women were marked after Rake was imprisoned." Marcus pulled out his phone and began scrolling through the missing persons database, cross-referencing dates and locations. 8 bodies, 8 women who had disappeared over the past 4 years, all from different cities across Colorado, Wyoming, and New Mexico. They ranged in age from 19 to 27, all college students or recent graduates, all blonde or light brown hair, all last seen alone, going about ordinary daily activities. And the police had never connected them. Why would they? Different jurisdictions, different circumstances, different investigating agencies. Without a central database specifically looking for this pattern, these women had simply become statistics, cold cases filed away in dusty folders. But Thomas Rake had known about all of them. From inside the most isolated prison cell in America, he had known. Marcus drove back to ADX Florence that evening as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like fire. His mind was racing with questions, with theories, with growing dread about what this all meant. Warden Hollis met him at the entrance, with an updated visitor log and security footage from the past 4 years. "I pulled everything you requested," she said, handing him a thick stack of documents. "Rake has had exactly 12 visitors since his incarceration, all of them attorneys or legal representatives. He has made 47 phone calls, all monitored and recorded. He has sent and received 316 pieces of mail, every single one screened by our security team." Marcus flipped through the logs, and nothing suspicious, no coded messages, no unusual patterns, nothing we flagged at the time, Hollis admitted. "But we were not looking for this specific type of communication. We were monitoring for escape plans, threats against staff, coordination with criminal organizations, not for instructions to an active serial killer on the outside." They sat in Hollis's office, spreading the documents across her desk. Marcus began cross-referencing dates. The first victim, a 19-year-old named Jessica Chen, had disappeared in March 2016, exactly 6 months after Rake's arrival at ADX Florence. 2 weeks before her disappearance, Rake had received a letter from a legal assistant named David Brennan, working for a civil rights organization that specialized in prisoner advocacy. Marcus pulled up Brennan's information, 32 years old, law degree from University of Denver. Clean criminal record, active in several prisoner rights movements, on paper. He looked completely legitimate. I need copies of every letter Brennan sent to Rake, Marcus said. Hollis opened a file cabinet and produced a folder containing photocopies of the correspondence, standard legal language. Discussions about potential appeals, questions about prison conditions. Requests for interviews about Rake's treatment in isolation. Nothing overtly suspicious, but Marcus read them again, more carefully this time, looking for anything hidden between the lines, and then he saw it, in a letter dated February 2016. 1 month before Jessica Chen's disappearance. There was a seemingly innocuous paragraph. I have been reviewing the original case files and would like to discuss the photographic evidence from the Boulder area. Specifically, the images taken near the University District in late autumn. Please let me know if you would be willing to provide additional context during my next visit. Boulder. University District. Late autumn. Jessica Chen had been a student at University of Colorado. Boulder. She had disappeared near campus in early spring. But the letter was asking about autumn photographs. Unless it was not really asking about photographs at all. Marcus felt his stomach turn. Warden, I need to see the visitor logs for David Brennan every time he came to this facility. Hollis pulled up the digital records on her computer. Brennan had visited Rake 17 times. Over the past 4 years, always scheduling his appointments weeks in advance. Always following proper protocol. The visits had occurred at regular intervals, roughly every 3 months. Marcus compared the dates to the disappearances. 2 weeks after Brennan's visit in February 2016, Jessica Chen vanished. 2 weeks after his visit in August 2016, a woman named Amanda Torres disappeared from Albuquerque. 2 weeks after his visit in January 2017, Rachel Kim went missing from Cheyenne. The pattern was undeniable. Brennan would visit Rake. They would have a conversation in a monitored room, saying nothing incriminating. And then, exactly 2 weeks later, another woman would vanish. I need to speak with Rake again, Marcus said. Right now, they brought Rake to the same interview room, same restraints, same armed guards at the door. But this time, Marcus had leverage. This time, he had a name. Rake sat down with that same thin smile on his face. Back so soon, Agent Webb. Did you find Sarah? Did you look at her hand like I told you? David Brennan, Marcus said simply. For the first time, Rake's smile faltered. Just for a moment, just the slightest flicker of surprise in his eyes. But it was enough. I do not know what you are talking about, Rake said carefully. Your legal advocate, the man who has visited you 17 times, the man who has been killing women on your behalf. Rake leaned back and laughed, a cold sound that echoed off the concrete walls. You think David is killing for me? Oh. Agent Webb, you really do not understand what is happening here at all. Then explain it to me. David is not my accomplice, Rake said, his eyes glittering with malicious amusement. David is my student. My protege. I am not directing him. I am teaching him. Every visit, I share my experiences, my techniques, my philosophy. I tell him about the women I killed, about how I chose them, about what made each one special. And he listens. He learns. He improves upon my methods. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. You are confessing to conspiracy to commit murder, am I? Rake tilted his head. I am simply having conversations with my legal representative about my past crimes. How he chooses to use that information is not my responsibility. I am locked in a concrete box 23 hours a day, Agent Webb. I cannot be held accountable for the actions of free men. David is not my accomplice, Rake said, his eyes glittering with malicious amusement. David is my student. My protege. I am not directing him. I am teaching him. Every visit, I share my experiences, my techniques, my philosophy. I tell him about the women I killed, about how I chose them, about what made each one special. And he listens. He learns. He improves upon my methods. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. You are confessing to conspiracy to commit murder, am I? Rake tilted his head. I am simply having conversations with my legal representative about my past crimes. How he chooses to use that information is not my responsibility. I am locked in a concrete box 23 hours a day, Agent Webb. I cannot be held accountable for the actions of free men. We will find him. We will stop him. Will you? Rake's smile returned, wider than before. David Brennan is not his real name. The man you are looking for does not exist in any database. The law firm he claims to work for has never heard of him. The address on his correspondence is a mail drop. He has been using false credentials to access this facility for 4 years, and your security never caught him. Marcus glanced at Warden Hollis, who had gone pale. Even if you did find him. Ray continued, what would you charge him with? Having conversations with a prisoner. Visiting a law library, writing letters. He has been very careful, Agent Webb. I taught him to be careful. I taught him everything. Why? Marcus demanded. Why would you do this? You are already serving multiple life sentences. You will never leave this place. What could you possibly gain? Rake leaned forward as far as his chains would allow, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Immortality, Agent Webb. Long after I am dead and forgotten, my work will continue. David will teach others. They will teach more. My methods will spread like a virus, infecting new minds, creating new artists. I am not just a killer anymore. I am a philosophy. I am an idea. And ideas cannot be locked in concrete cells. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He needed air. He needed to think. But Rake was not finished. Agent Webb, one more thing. You found 8 bodies in the desert. But David has been visiting me for 4 years. Do the math. Where do you think the others are? The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. 8 bodies, 17 visits. If the pattern held, there should be at least 17 victims, which meant 9 bodies were still missing. 9 families still waiting for answers. 9 graves still hidden somewhere in the vast expanse of desert and mountain. Marcus left the interview room and immediately called his partner in Denver. I need every federal resource we have. Search warrants for all of Brennan's correspondence. Forensic analysis of every letter. Background checks on every prisoner rights organization in the region. And I need a task force assembled by tomorrow morning. But even as he gave the orders, even as the machinery of law enforcement began to move, Marcus knew they were already behind. Brennan had 4 years of careful planning, 4 years of learning from one of the most methodical killers in modern history, 4 years to perfect his craft and cover his tracks. That night, Marcus sat in a cheap motel room outside Florence. Unable to sleep, he spread crime scene photos across the bed, looking for any detail he might have missed. The tattoo on each victim's hand, the careful positioning of the bodies, the 2-week interval between Rake's visits and the disappearances. That night, Marcus sat in a cheap motel room outside Florence, unable to sleep. He spread crime scene photos across the bed, looking for any detail he might have missed. The tattoo on each victim's hand, the careful positioning of the bodies, the 2-week interval between Rake's visits and the disappearances. And then he noticed something else. Each victim's clothing had been carefully folded and placed beside the body, not discarded, not torn or damaged, folded with almost ritualistic precision, in the pocket of Sarah Winter's jeans. Forensics had found a small piece of paper, a receipt from a coffee shop in Boulder, dated the day of her disappearance. Marcus pulled up the forensics reports from all 8 victims. Each one had similar receipts or ticket stubs in their pockets, small pieces of paper that tracked their last known movements. But why would the killer keep these? Why leave them with the bodies instead of destroying evidence? Unless they were not just evidence, unless they were trophies, proof of contact, documentation of the hunt. Marcus's phone rang, shattering the silence. It was Elena Martinez from the forensics lab. Agent Webb, I have been analyzing the soil samples from the burial site. The composition matches several locations across the Southwest. But there is something unusual. We found trace amounts of a specific type of clay that is only found in 3 counties in New Mexico. If the other bodies are buried in similar locations, we might be able to narrow down the search area. Send me the coordinates, Marcus said, already reaching for his jacket. There is one more thing, Helena continued. We found DNA evidence on Sarah Winter's clothing. Not from the killer, from another victim. Cross-contamination suggests the killer kept them somewhere together before burial, some kind of secondary location. A secondary location. A place where Brennan could keep his victims before disposing of them. A place where he could take his time, follow Rake's teachings, perfect his technique. Marcus hung up and stared at the map of the Southwest spread across his laptop screen. Thousands of square miles of empty desert, abandoned buildings, remote ranches. Finding one man in all that emptiness would be nearly impossible. But then Marcus remembered something Rake had said during their first interview. Asked Thomas Rake about the desert, not a desert, the desert, as if it were a specific place. Somewhere significant. Marcus pulled up Rake's original case files from 2015. The locations where his victims had been found formed a rough circle around a specific area in southern Colorado, near the New Mexico border. At the center of that circle was an abandoned mining town called Perdition, population 0, slowly crumbling back into the earth. Marcus zoomed in on satellite images. Dozens of empty buildings, mine shafts, underground tunnels. The perfect place to hide bodies. The perfect place to continue a dead man's work. He grabbed his phone and called the task force coordinator. I know where he is. I know where Brennan has been operating. We need tactical teams, search and rescue, and cadaver dogs. And we need them at these coordinates by sunrise. But even as Marcus raced toward what he hoped would be answers, even as federal agents mobilized across 3 states, somewhere in the darkness, David Brennan was already moving. He had seen the news reports about the desert excavation. He had watched federal agents swarm the burial site on his carefully hidden cameras. And he knew his time as Thomas Rake's student was coming to an end. But he was not afraid. Rake had taught him well. Rake had taught him that the game was not about never getting caught. The game was about how many moves you could make before the final checkmate. And Brennan had one move left to make, one final lesson to teach the world about what he had learned in those concrete interview rooms. In a basement somewhere in the ruins of Perdition, 9 women were still waiting to be found, but one of them was still alive. The convoy of federal vehicles rolled into Perdition just as the first light of dawn broke over the eastern mountains. Marcus stood at the edge of the ghost town, watching as tactical teams fanned out across the abandoned streets. The buildings here looked like skeletal remains, weathered wood and rusted metal slowly collapsing under the weight of decades of neglect. Windows gaped like empty eye sockets. Doors hung askew on broken hinges. The wind whistled through the ruins, carrying with it the scent of dust and decay. Special Agent Lisa Chen, Marcus's partner from the Denver field office, arrived with the cadaver dog units. She was 42, a veteran investigator with 15 years in violent crimes, and one of the few people Marcus trusted completely. She approached him with 2 cups of coffee and a tablet displaying thermal imaging scans of the area. We have heat signatures, she said, pointing to the screen. Multiple locations underground. The old mine system runs beneath most of the town. Some of the tunnels are still accessible. Marcus studied the thermal map. Most of the signatures were small, probably animals that had taken shelter in the abandoned shafts. But one signature was different, larger, human-sized. And it was moving. There, he said, pointing to a cluster of buildings on the western edge of town that used to be the mining company's administrative complex. If there is a maintained entrance to the tunnels, it would be there. They moved as a unit, 20 federal agents in full tactical gear, approaching the old administrative building with weapons drawn. The structure was larger than the others, 3 stories of brick and timber that had somehow survived better than its neighbors. The front door had been reinforced recently, Marcus noticed. New hinges. A modern lock that looked completely out of place on the century-old building. The breach team moved into position, On Marcus's signal, they broke through the door with a battering ram, flooding into the building with flashlights cutting through the darkness. The first floor was empty, filled with debris and the remnants of old office furniture. But in the back corner, hidden behind a filing cabinet, was a steel door with a numeric keypad lock. Marcus approached it carefully, examining the mechanism. This was not old mining equipment. This was modern security, installed within the last few years. Someone had gone to considerable effort to secure whatever lay beyond this door. The tech specialist worked quickly, bypassing the electronic lock with a portable device. The door clicked open, revealing a concrete staircase descending into darkness. The air that rushed out was cold and stale, carrying with it an unmistakable smell that made Marcus's stomach turn. Death, decomposition, and something else. Chemical cleaners, bleach, the artificial scent of someone trying to mask the evidence of their crimes. They descended slowly, weapons raised, flashlights sweeping the darkness. The staircase led to a tunnel, reinforced with modern supports and lighting fixtures. Someone had been maintaining this space, keeping it functional and accessible. Generator-powered lights flickered on as they moved deeper, triggered by motion sensors. The tunnel opened into a large chamber that had once been part of the mining operation, but it had been converted into something else entirely. Living quarters. A kitchenette with a small refrigerator and microwave. A desk with a laptop computer and printer. And along one wall, a series of photographs pinned to a corkboard. Marcus approached the board slowly, his heart pounding. The photographs showed women, dozens of them. Some Marcus recognized from missing persons reports, others he had never seen before. Each one had a small notation in the corner. A number from 1 to 34, 34 victims. 34 women who had disappeared while David Brennan studied under Thomas Rake's tutelage. Lisa moved to the laptop and opened it carefully, using gloved hands to preserve any evidence. The screen came to life, displaying a document. To my mentor, Thomas Rake, who showed me that true art requires patience, precision, and the courage to pursue perfection. We need to search the rest of these tunnels, Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. If he kept records this detailed, the bodies have to be here somewhere. They spread out through the underground complex, following tunnels that branched off in multiple directions. The cadaver dogs led them to a chamber deeper in the mine system. And what they found there would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. 9 graves, 9 women, buried in shallow pits dug into the earthen floor, each one carefully marked with a wooden cross bearing a name and date. Brennan had not hidden them, he had memorialized them. He had turned this underground chamber into a grotesque shrine to his victims, but there should have been 10 graves. The thermal imaging had shown 10 heat signatures in this area, 9 bodies accounted for. 1 signature still missing. Marcus turned slowly, scanning the chamber with his flashlight. The beam caught something in the corner, partially hidden behind a support beam. A door, another steel door, smaller than the others, with a heavy deadbolt lock on the outside. He approached it carefully, signaling for backup. Lisa and 2 tactical officers moved into position, weapons ready. Marcus threw the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Inside was a cell, 8 feet by 8 feet, concrete walls. A single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, and huddled in the corner, emaciated and terrified, was a young woman Marcus recognized from the missing persons reports, Jennifer Hayes. The paramedics rushed in, wrapping Jennifer in thermal blankets, checking her vital signs, administering for fluids. He said Thomas Rake promised him you would find this place eventually. He said it was all part of the lesson. Marcus felt ice flood his veins. Where is he now? Where is Brennan? Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. He left 2 days ago. He said the game was over. He said it was time for the final act. Marcus ran back to the main chamber where they had found the laptop. Understanding hit Marcus like a hammer blow. Brennan was not running. He was not hiding. He was going back to where it all started. He was going back to Thomas Rake. Marcus grabbed his radio. All units, we have a potential security threat at ADX Florence. Suspect David Brennan may be attempting to access the facility. Contact Warden Hollis immediately and put the entire prison on lockdown. But even as he gave the order, Marcus knew they were too late. Brennan had been planning this for months, maybe years. He would not make his move until he was certain of success. The drive back to ADX Florence took 45 minutes. The fastest Marcus had ever made that trip. Federal vehicles raced through the desert with lights flashing and sirens wailing. Marcus called Warden Hollis repeatedly, but the calls went straight to voicemail. He tried the prison's main switchboard. No answer. When they arrived at the facility, they found the front gate unmanned. The guard booth was empty. The electronic security systems were dark, and the main entrance door stood slightly ajar. It was as if the entire facility had been evacuated. They found the first bodies in the control room, 2 guards. Both shot execution style with a small caliber pistol equipped with a suppressor. More bodies, for more guards, a prison administrator, all killed with the same clinical efficiency. Brennan had come prepared. He had studied the facility layout. Marcus reached cell H217 and found the door standing open. Whatever Brennan had planned, Rake had not expected this ending. Marcus stared at the message, his mind racing. Brennan had killed Rake. But why? Why go through all this effort, all this risk, just to kill a man who was already buried alive in a concrete tomb? Did she see where he went after? She said he walked out the front door. Marcus pulled out his phone and called the FBI's regional office. I need alerts sent to every law enforcement agency in the Southwest. And I need surveillance footage from every traffic camera between here and the Colorado border. But even as he mobilized the search, Marcus knew the truth. Brennan was gone. He had spent 4 years learning from Thomas Rake, not just how to kill, but how to disappear, how to become a ghost. How to move through the world without leaving traces. The investigation that followed would become one of the largest manhunts in FBI history. They found Brennan's abandoned vehicles, his safe houses, his false identities. They found evidence of his crimes stretching back even further than they had imagined. Victims from before he had ever contacted Thomas Rake. The spiral tattoo they had found on Sarah Winter's hand became the signature they searched for, the mark that connected dozens of unsolved disappearances across the western United States. But they never found David Brennan. The man simply vanished, as if he had never existed at all. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a cemetery in Boulder, attending the funeral of Sarah Winters. Her family had finally been able to lay her to rest, to have closure after so many months of agonizing uncertainty. Marcus had attended all 34 funerals, had looked into the eyes of all those grieving families, had made promises he knew he might never be able to keep. As the service ended and the mourners began to disperse, Marcus noticed a man standing at the edge of the cemetery, partially hidden behind a large oak tree. He was wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, but something about his posture, his build, seemed familiar. Marcus began walking toward him, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. The man saw him coming and turned, walking quickly toward the parking lot. Marcus broke into a run, but by the time he reached the spot where the man had been standing, there was nothing there but an envelope weighted down with a small stone. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. It showed Marcus standing outside ADX Florence on the day he had first interviewed Thomas Rake. And on the back, written in that same careful block lettering, was a message: "Thank you, Agent Webb, for being part of the lesson. Thomas Rake taught me that the greatest artists are never truly appreciated in their own time. He taught me patience, he taught me precision, but he made one critical mistake. He got caught. I have learned from his failure. You will search for me until the day you retire. You will see my work in every unsolved case. You will wonder if every missing woman bears my mark, but you will never find me. Because unlike my teacher, I know when to stop. I know when the masterpiece is complete." The 34 women were not random, Agent Webb. They were a message. It only needs opportunity and patience. Sleep well, knowing that I am out there somewhere, living a normal life, being a good neighbor, a productive citizen. You have met me. You have walked past me. You will never know. Marcus stood in that empty cemetery, holding the photograph with trembling hands, as the terrible truth settled over him like a shroud. Brennan was right. The investigation would never truly end. Every unsolved case would carry the shadow of doubt. Every missing person would raise the question: is this him? Has he started again? But Marcus also knew something Brennan did not. The photograph was evidence. Real evidence. It had been taken from a specific location at a specific time. There would be cameras nearby, witnesses who might have seen someone photographing federal agents. It was a mistake, a tiny crack in the perfect facade, and sometimes that was all it took. One mistake, one moment of arrogance, one need to prove superiority that override caution. Marcus returned to his office and began the work again. Frame-by-frame analysis of security footage, interviews with everyone who had been near ADX Florence that day, forensic examination of the photograph and envelope. He assembled a team of analysts who did nothing but search for patterns, for connections, for the invisible thread that would lead them to David Brennan. 3 years passed. The case grew cold in the public eye, replaced by newer tragedies and more immediate concerns, but Marcus never stopped searching. He never stopped analyzing. He never stopped believing that somewhere in the mountains of data and evidence, there was an answer. And then, on a Tuesday morning in April, a breakthrough. A financial analyst noticed an unusual pattern in the bank records of the civil rights organization Brennan had claimed to represent: regular payments to a consulting firm in Arizona. The firm did not seem to do any actual work, had no website, no employees, no physical office. It was a shell company, a way to move money without leaving obvious traces. But shell companies had to be registered somewhere. They had to file paperwork. They had to have at least one name attached to them, even if that name was false. It took 6 more months of investigation, of following the money through layers of corporate structures and offshore accounts. But eventually, they found him, living under a new identity in a small town in Oregon, working as a high school guidance counselor, married, well-liked by his neighbors. The perfect picture of a normal, productive citizen. The arrest happened on a quiet Sunday morning. No dramatic chase. No final confrontation. David Brennan, now calling himself Michael Foster, simply opened his door to find 20 federal agents with weapons drawn and nowhere left to run. In his basement, they found everything: the equipment he had used to create false identities, the journals documenting his crimes in meticulous detail, the trophies he had kept, one small item from each of his 34 victims, and a half-written manuscript, the sequel to the manual he had created. Titled Beyond the Master, The Evolution of Perfect Crime, the trial lasted 3 months. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. David Brennan was sentenced to 34 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. And in a final ironic twist, he was sent to ADX Florence, to cell H217, the same cell where Thomas Rake had lived and died. Marcus attended the sentencing hearing. He watched as Brennan was led away in chains, headed for the same concrete tomb where his teacher had spent his final years. As Brennan passed, he turned and looked directly at Marcus. There was no anger in his eyes, no fear, just a calm acceptance, and perhaps the faintest hint of a smile. "See you in the desert, Agent Webb," Brennan said quietly, "when you finally figure out where the other 11 are buried." And then he was gone, disappearing through the courthouse doors into federal custody, into the system that would bury him alive in concrete and silence for the rest of his natural life. Marcus stood in the empty courtroom long after everyone else had left. 11 more victims. 11 more families waiting for answers. 11 more graves hidden somewhere in the vast southwestern desert. The work would never truly be finished. Thomas Rake's legacy lived on, not in David Brennan's continued crimes, but in the countless hours of investigation still required. The families still seeking closure. The empty spaces in the world where 34 vibrant young women should have been, but evil had not won. It had been stopped. It had been caught. It had been locked away in a place where it could never hurt anyone again. As Marcus walked out of the courthouse into the bright Oregon sunshine, his phone rang. It was Jennifer Hayes, the woman they had rescued from that underground cell in perdition. She called every few months, just to talk, to remind herself that she had survived, that she was still alive while her captor rotted in isolation. "I saw the news," she said, her voice stronger now than it had been in that dark chamber. "They are sending him to ADX Florence." "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "Good," Jennifer said. "Let him spend the rest of his life in the same cage where his teacher died. Let him understand what it feels like to be buried alive." They talked for a few more minutes about her recovery, her return to graduate school, her plans for the future. When she hung up, Marcus felt something he had not felt in 4 years. Not quite hope. Not quite peace, but something close to both. The case files would remain open. The search for the final 11 victims would continue. But tonight, Marcus would go home. He would sleep without dreaming of concrete cells and desert graves. He would wake tomorrow and continue the work. Because that was what the victims deserved. What their families needed. What justice demanded. And somewhere in the high desert of Colorado, in a 7 by 12-foot concrete cell, David Brennan would begin his first night in ADX Florence. 23 hours of silence, 1 hour of solitary exercise, no human contact, no windows, no hope of ever leaving. The student had indeed surpassed the master, but in the end, they had both ended up in exactly the same place, buried alive, forgotten, erased from the world they had terrorized. And that, Marcus thought as he drove toward home through the fading light, was the only justice men like Thomas Rake and David Brennan would ever deserve.